Hey everyone, welcome to Photography 1. This class is an introduction to basic photography composition, some different photography styles, and also we'll just barely start covering the basics of manual cameras. So in this video today, I'm going to be explaining your first two assignments. And what I recommend is that after I explain the first assignment, you go ahead and pause or stop the video and go work on that assignment before you come back and learn about the second assignment. So let's get started. So the first assignment is called Instagram Introduction. Okay, so first assignment, Instagram Introduction. This assignment is meant for us to get to know each other. It lets you practice turning in an assignment for the class, and also it lets me see what you already know about photography. So, what does this assignment look like? Basically, you're going to take a photo of anything or anyone that is of interest to you. It can be anything you like, and you're going to try and take a photo that you think is Instagram worthy. So what does that mean? You're going to use all of the skills and techniques you already know about photography to try and take the very best picture you know how to take. So use your prior knowledge to take a photo. You're trying to make the very best photograph that you know how to make. And so, like, in your mind, think about, like, how do you compose an image, anything you already know about composition and arranging the objects in the frame to make it look as good as possible. Think, like, your criteria is, what do you think would be a photo that would get lots of comments or likes on Instagram? And basically this photo is just so that I can see what you already know about photography, and also it gives you a chance to take a photo that kind of tells us a little something about you. So there you go. You're using prior knowledge to take a photo. You're going to turn in just one photo. You're thinking of what would get a lot of likes and comments if it was posted on social media. Okay, and this assignment is going to be in Canvas, and you're gonna find it under Discussions. I'm gonna have you practice posting your photo in the discussions. And because we want to be able to share with each other what the photo is that we took. And I also would like you to I need you to comment on two other students' submissions. So post your photo and then comment on two other posts. Okay, so that's your first assignment. Instagram Introduction. It will be in Canvas Discussions. I recommend that at this point you pause and you work on this assignment, and then when you're finished, come back and I'll tell you all about the next assignment for this week. All right, welcome back. So the second assignment for this first week of school is I'm gonna give a brief overview of the principles of art and design that we're focusing on for this photography class. And what we're gonna do is basically you're going to be making 2 to 3 photographs a week, where each photograph focuses on implementing one of those principles of design. So let me go over the 6 main principles of design that we're going to focus on. So, principles of design for this class. Okay, so our first one that we're focusing on is called balance. Balance is basically just a way of combining visual elements to give a feeling of stability to your photograph or your image. So let me write that down. A way of combining elements to give a feeling of stability. So, what does that mean? You might have heard of this, but it doesn't really make sense to you. So what's balance mean? There's 2 main ways of implementing balance in a photograph. There's symmetrical and asymmetrical. A symmetrical photo means it's the same on both sides, or on top and bottom it's the same, whichever direction, it doesn't matter. So, same on both sides. So what that could look like is maybe I have a photograph of a flower. Okay, maybe I have a photo of a flower and here's the stem. So, well, let me fix it just a little bit, because for it to be symmetrical, it has to be pretty much identical, or very nearly identical. It doesn't have to be perfectly the same, but it needs to be very, very close. So in order to know if this is symmetrical, I would have to be able to cut the photograph down the middle and have it have the same things on both sides, or like the same quantity of objects, or arranged in the same way. Asymmetrical means that it's different on each side. So what could that look like? I could have maybe a tree that has a swing coming off of it, and maybe there's a, I don't know, tricycle. Okay. Asymmetrical means it's different. This can either relate to the number of objects in the photograph being different on each side. It can also just be that the 2 sides aren't related to each other hardly in any way. With the flower, there's like the same number of petals, there's the same amount of objects, same colors, etc. So it's symmetrical. With this one, we have one really big object and one really small object. And if I cut it in half, it does not look the same. If I cut it in half the other direction, it's still not the same. Down here, there's a lot of things happening, and up here, there's going to be a lot of empty space, and then just the top of the tree. So that's a brief overview of balance. For each of these principles of design, I will make a separate video for each one that does a deep dive into each principle, and that gives more specific examples. But today is just an overview. Okay, so that's our first one, is balance. Okay, our next principle is contrast. Contrast is basically just the amount of difference between 2 elements of your photo. In photography, we mostly use contrast to refer to the difference in the amount of lightness and darkness, or the amount of difference between the colors. So let me write this down really fast. Amount of difference between 2 elements. Okay, so when we're talking about light and dark, light and dark, think about a black and white photograph that you may have seen. Or if you have some around the house, go find one and take a look at it with me. I want you to look at the very darkest spot on the photograph. How black does the darkest area of the photo get? Is it pure black? Is it just dark gray? What about the lightest part of the photograph? Does it get all the way bright white, or is it just like slightly off of white? Is it a little bit gray? Is it kind of a medium gray? The bigger the difference is between the blackest spot and the brightest highlight, that describes your contrast. If there's a really big difference, if your brightest spot gets pure white and your darkest spot is all the way black, you have high contrast. If everything is kind of in variations of gray, like if the darkest spot is just kind of dark gray and the brightest spot is just a light gray, you would say that you have low contrast. The other kind of contrast is with color. You may have heard of the color wheel before. All right, you have red. That's not a very good red marker. Let's try again. There we go. All right, the color wheel, we have red. I don't have all the markers that will help me to do a good job of this. Because I would need yellow and stuff. Okay, red, green. Let's try making that green a little bit better. Green and blue and purple. The only thing, what am I missing on my color wheel? I'm missing yellow and orange, but that's because I don't have the right Sharpie or the right markers for it. Right, I'd have some kind of an orange color over here. I've got a brown for today. And then I also am missing yellow. I need a yellow dot right there. With color, to create contrast in colors, you would need to choose the colors that are on opposite sides of the color wheel from each other. So for example, opposites on the color wheel include red and green, right? That's why some colors are combined together at holidays. Red and green are combined at Christmas because they're opposites, so they complement each other, like they look nice together, but they also help each of those two colors to be brighter and more vibrant by pairing them together. Because they kind of contrast, they create more vividness. Other opposites include blue and yellow, or blue and orange. And then it depends on the shade. It's sort of blue and gold are opposites, and then purple and orange are opposites. So pairing opposites together can create contrast. In my deep dive video, I will go over more specific examples of how to achieve color contrast and also light and dark contrast. My next principle of design is repetition. Repetition is just having a shape, color, or object that is repeated over and over in your photograph. So, object, color, or shape. Repeated. Repetition can be useful in photography or create interest in a photograph. Think about like senior photos you might have seen in people's yearbooks or just portraits that you've seen on social media. A really common example of using repetition is when somebody and their photographer go out to a pair of railroad tracks and they walk down the railroad tracks for a photograph. You've all seen, I'm sure, at least one photo of the person walking down the railroad tracks. or sitting on them or looking cute on the railroad tracks. That's because the repetition helps create movement in the photo, it helps create interest, it's visually pleasing. So repetition is one of the easier ones to remember, and it's one of the easier ones to implement as well. Okay, next we have space. So with space, I'm going to have to break it down before I give the explanation. So there's two kinds of space. There's positive space, and there's negative space. So in a photograph, let's pull up that photograph that I invented of that daisy or flower or whatever that I had drawn a little while ago when I talked about balance. So here's that flower I made. Positive space is the part of a photo that has details or the area of interest. It's the part of the photo that you're wanting to draw attention to. So in this drawing of a pretend photograph of a flower, the positive space is the actual flower. Just this. This is the positive space. So positive space is the area of interest or detail. Okay? Now, if the positive space is the area of interest or detail, take a moment, maybe say it to yourself, make a guess. What is the negative space? The negative space is everything else. It's usually the area that is like empty or quiet, like visually quiet or calm. Generally speaking, it's what we would consider the background. Okay? So, area of quiet, empty. It's also the background, or it's often the background. Okay, so here would be all this white space. Okay. All right, so we've talked about positive and negative space. Now we're going to talk about movement. In photography, there's a very particular kind of movement that we use a lot. So that type of movement that we're going to focus on the most for this class is called leading lines. Leading lines can be literal, actual lines that exist in real life that you're using to create movement in your photograph. They can also be implied lines. So what does that mean? If you've ever seen a photograph of a street and the subject, the person of the photograph, is standing in the middle of the road, standing on the yellow lines, those yellow lines become leading lines if the person is in the middle of the road, because the lines start at one end of the photograph and lead up to the subject. So something like this, right? There's actual lines that exist in the real world that are in the photograph that make movement through the photograph, because your eyes will start at one spot and follow the lines all the way through till wherever they finish. So this is literal. Implied leading lines is when you use repetition of an object, and if you angle the camera correctly, all those repeated objects will line up. And if your subject is at the end of that lineup of objects, of repeated objects, that can create an implied line. If you were just walking through my classroom, my desks don't seem like they're lined up in any particular way. But if I crouch down and I get in the correct angle with my camera, and then I place a person at the end of the row, right? Row implies that there's a line, right? There's a line of desks. And if you line up correctly, you can make the repetition seem like an actual physical line that shows in the photo. So then you follow the repetition all the way up to the subject. So they can be literal or implied. Okay, the last one is called the rule of thirds. And I'm going to grab a piece of paper for a second to demonstrate since I'm running out of whiteboard. Okay, what pen is in my photograph? I'm going to grab a pen. Okay, so this is my photograph. What does rule of thirds mean? It means that if I were to divide up my photograph, if I was to fold it into 3 parts, these are some vertical thirds, okay? You could also fold it the other way, right? I can have thirds this way. The rule of thirds is just where you attempt to place the subject of your photograph on one of the places where these lines cross each other. If you place the most important piece of your photograph on one of these corners, it helps draw emphasis to your subject. It can make your point more strongly. It's in general, most people, their brain is wired where this is very visually and aesthetically pleasing to look at. It's more pleasant to look at a photo aligned this way than if your subject was just off in the corner, or even if it was in the center. Centered photographs are fine from time to time, but you don't want all of your photographs to be centered. It's also good to, if you have a big thing, a big object, say you're taking photos in a city, like in downtown, placing a big object like a building on just on a whole third, and then having the rest of your photo line up with the other thirds, that's also really visually pleasing. So rule of thirds is where if you were to take your photo and fold it into 3 parts, one way or the other, that your main object would fall on one of these cross spots. Okay, so placing objects on a vertical or horizontal third. Placing the subject on a third. Okay, so what does this have to do with the second assignment? We're going to have a long-term assignment that I'll give more instructions for in another video, but just to be aware of it. So we're going to have an assignment where your job will be to find examples of these kinds of photographs on the internet, and you're going to compile them together and then show me that you understand what each of these looks like. Okay, so to find this assignment, it's called Composition Research. So here's our page in Canvas. You'll come over to the Modules tab, and it'll be right under Composition, and you'll see that there's notes. This has slideshow that goes into more depth on some of these things that we've been talking about in this video. The assignment is right here, Composition Research. So you'll click on that. To do this assignment, you're going to click the link down here, and when it says to make a copy, you will click yes. Please change the title to remove the words copy of at the beginning of the title. That way it doesn't get lost in the depths of your Google Drive. And then what you'll do is you will edit the slides with your research. So let's take a look at it together really quick. So see, it says make a copy. So you're going to do that. And first thing you're supposed to do is remove the words copy of, and also go ahead and remove the word template. Okay, so you're going to come up, the first thing you do is change the title. You could even put your name in it. I think if you put your name in the title, put your name at the end of the title, okay? So here's an example one. So what you're going to do is follow the instructions on each slide. So where it says your first and last name, you're going to take that and replace it with your name. Wow, I can't even spell my own name right. Okay. And then you're going to find photos as examples. This research is to help you make sure that you're solidifying the idea of what is balance, what are all these different types of things. So for the first slide, it says one example of symmetrical balance with the link for the image and why you think it follows the rule. So you would come to Google and you would search photography with symmetrical balance. You go to images and you're going to find something that appeals to you, something that you like, okay, that fits this topic. So let's say you pick this basketball. Here's how you're going to insert a photo. Make sure when you find the photo you like, you right click it, or two-finger click if you're on a laptop, and click Open Image in New Tab. Now my image is over here. You can click and drag it on most computers until you're hovering over the tab with your Google Slides, and you can drop it in. And go ahead and stretch it so it fills the page. Now remember, it says you need the link. So don't close this tab yet. You're going to copy the link. So Command or Control C, come back. And Command or Control V. And now you have to type in why you think it follows the rule. This photo is symmetrical because it has the same number of objects and the same colors and shapes on both sides of the photo. Now if that's not fitting very well, you have the liberty to change your size of font, what font you're using, etc. Okay, so you will be completing this slideshow. Each slide tells you exactly what I want you to do, okay? And just follow the instructions and then you'll be done. When you're finished with the slideshow, you'll come back to Canvas and you'll click Submit Assignment, and you'll come and you'll click on Google Drive, and on mine it's blank because I'm pretending to be a student, but for you it should have a whole list of all of your different assignments, and it should have a search bar. So you would just type in the search bar composition rules and it should pop right up, and you'll click on it, and at the bottom you would click Submit, okay? You'd click that yellow Submit Assignment button. Okay, good luck. Good luck, you guys. If you have questions, please contact me. You can message me on Canvas, you can add me on the class Remind, or you can email me. So let me know if you need any help. Bye.